My name is Emma Carter, and I was 17 when it happened. 17 with nothing but a backpack full of college dreams and a heart that hadn't learned how to break properly yet. That day, the doctor said it flatly, the treatment will cost over $100,000. The chance of recovery is less than 10%. No one cried, no one said a word. My mother Linda just stared ahead, her voice cold and final. Let him go. He's lived long enough. We're not wasting money. And then they left. Just like that. Out of the room, out of his life. My grandfather, Henry Carter, was 84 years old. He raised me when no one else wanted to. He taught me to tie my shoes, to fix a leaky sink, to tell the truth. And in his final moments, they abandoned him. I sat there alone in a cold hallway with nothing but a trembling hand and a decision I wasn't ready to make. But I made it anyway. I stayed. Have you ever had to choose love over everything else? Have you ever stayed when everyone else walked away? If you have, I hope this story reminds you, you're not alone, and what you did, it mattered. I watched the door close behind them. No goodbye, no second thought, just silence. The hallway outside the ICU smelled like bleach and distance. A nurse passed me by, avoiding eye contact. Another turned off the lights in the waiting room, and I just sat there, still holding Grandpa's chart in one hand and my half-empty wallet in the other. I kept hoping someone would turn around, that maybe, just maybe, my mother would remember he taught her to ride a bike, that Uncle Richard would remember the Christmases Grandpa saved with his pension check, but no one came back. I was 17, a kid. No money, no backup, no plan, just fear. And love. So much love it hurt to breathe. The nurse came over quietly. Are you Emma? I nodded. She looked down at her clipboard. We'll need someone to sign the financial responsibility forms. Insurance only covers 30%? Then she paused. If we don't intervene, he may not make it through the week. I didn't ask questions. I didn't ask who else could help. I just picked up the pen. And I signed. Not because I wasn't scared. God, I was terrified. But because love doesn't walk away. Not when it matters most. Have you ever stayed, even when it cost you everything? They gave me a stack of forms. Page after page of numbers, signatures, disclaimers. It felt like signing away my future one stroke at a time. I handed over everything I had. My college savings, $200, money from scholarships, tips from cleaning motel rooms every summer. Then I walked down to HR, still shaking. I'll do anything I said, just something. By 6 p.m., I was scrubbing floors in the pediatric wing. By 10 p.m., I was sitting by Grandpa's bedside. The machines around him beeped slowly like a ticking clock. I couldn't stop. He looked so small under those blankets. Wires on his chest. A tube in his arm. Still. Silent. Pale. I held his hand anyway, just in case he could feel it. Just in case some part of him knew I was there. He didn't wake up that night. Not the next one either. But I stayed. I brought books. Old war novels. IKEA manuals. Anything to fill the quiet. I read out loud even when my voice cracked, even when I thought I was talking to a ghost. Have you ever kept showing up? Even when hope was barely breathing? Sometimes love isn't loud. It's just the choice to stay. One night longer. On the third night, sometime after midnight, his fingers twitched. At first, I thought I imagined it, but then his eyelids fluttered. A small breath. A whisper. You stayed. His voice was gravel and wind, but I heard every syllable. I nodded, tears burning behind my eyes. Always. He gripped my hand soft but steady, then drifted back into sleep. The machines beeped on. I didn't move. I just sat there holding his hand, watching the streetlights flicker beyond the window. Outside, the world kept spinning. Taxis. People laughing. Restaurants full of warmth and noise, but here it was still, quiet, sacred. Something had broken inside me, but something else had begun to rebuild. They thought they left me with a dying man, but they left me with time. Time to listen. Time to care. Time to grow into someone I never had permission to be. They walked away. I walked forward. Have you ever found your strength, not in what you had, but in what you refused to let go? That night, something changed, not in him, in me. I wasn't just the girl who stayed, I was becoming the woman he believed in. The doctors had said he wouldn't last a week, but a week passed, then two, then three. At first it was small. His fingers curled tighter around mine at night. His eyelids twitched when I read to him, a soft sigh when I brushed his hair. I didn't ask the doctors for odds anymore. I didn't care. I cared about the way his hand warmed up each evening, the way the beeping machines softened when he slept. Every day I worked 2 shifts, scrubbing floors, folding linens, then I'd race back upstairs, sit by his bed, and read out loud. Old magazines, broken manuals, even the hospital meal plan. It didn't matter. I just wanted him to hear my voice, to feel human things again. One afternoon, I was spoon-feeding him broth. He blinked, looked at me, and whispered, "Too salty." I froze. Then he smirked. "You've always been terrible at seasoning." I laughed through tears. It was the most beautiful complaint I had ever heard. They called it a miracle. They called it luck. But I knew better. Have you ever watched someone come back? Not because of medicine, but because someone simply refused to leave. That was us. Me and Grandpa. One breath at a time, coming back to life together. By week 5, Grandpa was sitting up. By week 7, he was walking again, slow, shaky, but smiling, always with my arms steadying him. The doctors called it a statistical anomaly. I called it love. Real, quiet, stubborn love. When he was finally discharged, we had nowhere to go. So we rented a tiny 2-room apartment across from the hospital. Peeling paint, a heater that rattled. 1 bathroom shared with 2 other tenants. But it was ours. No monitors, no fluorescent lights, just 2 mugs, 1 window, and a whole lot of heart. During the day, I worked hospital shifts and studied online for my GED. At night, Grandpa taught me not just algebra or science, but how to fix things. Broken lamps, old radios, even a coffee machine with a burnt wire. "Most people throw things out when they break," he said, handing me a soldering iron. "But if you understand how something works, you can rebuild it." He wasn't just talking about machines, and I knew that. Have you ever lived in a space that wasn't much but felt like everything? Because of who was inside, that apartment didn't have much, but it gave us peace, and a place to become more than what life said we were allowed to be. Evenings became our classroom. Under 1 flickering kitchen light, Grandpa taught me how to read blueprints, how to test a circuit, how to repair instead of replace. He called it thinking with your hands. I called it finally being seen. One night, while I fixed the microwave switch, he watched quietly from his chair. After a while, he said, "You've got the mind of an engineer." I laughed. "No, I've got the mind of a janitor who's scared of starting a fire." But I let that sentence sit inside me longer than I expected, because no one had ever said something like that to me before, not with pride, not like they meant it. The world had always told me what I wasn't. Too poor, too young, too broken. But Grandpa, he told me what I could be. Every small fix we made together, every wire we reconnected, felt like stitching myself back together too. He wasn't just helping me learn a skill. He was handing me belief, piece by piece. Have you ever had someone look at you not for who you were, but for who you could become? That was him, and little by little, I started becoming her, the woman he already saw, even when I didn't. By month 3, we had a shoebox full of cash, labeled in Grandpa's handwriting, "Repair Fund." Neighbors started knocking, a broken fan here, a flickering light there. Word spread fast. Emma and Mr. Carter, they don't just fix things, they care. We never advertised, didn't have a sign or a website, just trust passed from one worn-out appliance to the next. One evening, as I rewired an old toaster, Grandpa leaned over and said, "You don't need their name to build your own." I looked up. Whose name? He didn't answer, just smiled and went back to twisting wires. But I knew. He meant the family that left us behind. The ones who once said, "I'd never be more than a girl with a mop." And maybe they were right once, but not anymore. Because now I was building something, with my own hands, my own name. Have you ever felt yourself shifting from forgotten to found, not because someone gave you permission, but because you stopped waiting for it? That night, I labeled our toolbox, Emma Carter, repairs and restorations. No last names from people who disappeared, no borrowed titles, just truth, ours. The following spring, Grandpa brought home a flyer, a local tech program part-time for women in STEM. Free application, limited spots. He slid it across the table. You should apply. I shook my head. I don't belong in rooms like that. He didn't argue. He just said, then don't wait for a room. Build a door. Those words stuck. I stared at that flyer for days. I almost threw it away more than once, but I didn't. Because deep down, I wanted to believe him. Believe that I was more than what the world had decided for me. So I applied. I used the hospital printer during a break, typed my story into a box marked optional. I clicked send, then closed my eyes and whispered, please. A month later, I got the email, accepted. Part-time evening program, start date June 14th. I ran straight home waving the letter. Grandpa hugged me tighter than ever. You opened the door, he said. No, I smiled. We built it. Have you ever taken a step so small it felt invisible, but changed everything? That was mine. I didn't have the right background or the right name, but I had something better, belief, and someone who never stopped saying you can. 7 years passed, quietly, steadily. Grandpa turned 91, his steps slower, his stories longer, but every morning he still wound that old pocket watch at 7 a.m., and every evening he still asked about my code. We had a rhythm. Morning tea, hospital shifts, evening repairs, weekends filled with prototype sketches taped to the wall. Our little apartment looked like a lab stitched together with hope. The silence from my family stayed permanent. No calls, no letters, no, how's he doing? At first, I held on to hope. Maybe once he got better. Maybe once they saw us succeed. But then the bank account Mom used to help manage closed. The shared family phone plan disconnected. The last message I ever got from her simply said, you made your choice. Don't expect anything from us again. No explanation, no conversation, just a sentence that shut a door. I cried for days, not because she was gone, but because she didn't even miss me. Not really. Grandpa saw it in my face even when I tried to smile. He never insulted them, never raised his voice. He just said, some people only know how to love when it's easy. You're not one of those people. Have you ever realized someone wasn't coming back and found peace? Instead of pain, that was when I stopped waiting and started living. Money ran tight fast. Between hospital bills, rent, and school, I was working double shifts. Nights cleaning floors, days assisting at the hospital supply desk, squeezing in GED prep between laundry loads and missed meals. Sometimes I skipped dinner, just so Grandpa could have something warmer, something better. He hated that. Said it made him feel guilty, so he offered a deal. He'd teach me everything he knew, mechanics, basic coding, even how to solder cleanly if I promised one thing. Start charging for the work. I didn't want to at first. Helping neighbors felt right, but he said fixing things has value, and so do you. By month 3, our shoebox labeled Repair Fund was filling up again. By month 6 people came knocking daily, not just with broken fans or lamps, but with trust. They brought things no one else could fix, old sewing machines, radios from their childhood. We handled each one gently like it carried a story. And somehow, it always did. Word got around Emma and Henry, they don't just repair, they restore. Have you ever turned survival into service? Turned struggle into skill? We didn't have much, but we had hands that could heal. And a mission that grew from the cracks we refused to cover up. One night, while patching an old toaster, Grandpa looked over and said, you don't need their name to build your own. I didn't answer right away, but his words stayed. That year, I finished my GED, the first in our family to do it without help or approval. Then came the big step. We built our first working prototype, a small, wearable fall sensor. Simple, affordable. We called it Safe Step. We tested it on Grandpa. He'd pretend to fall, then laugh as he exaggerated the landing. That's how we know it works, he'd grin. We brought it to a local clinic. They loved it. We got our first micro grant. then another. Soon we had two interns, young, hopeful, and willing to work for coffee and purpose. By year 5, Safe Step became an LLC. By year 6, our devices were in 3 elder care facilities. By year 7, over 10,000 seniors used them. And Grandpa, he was our advisor, our tester, our heart. He didn't say much at meetings, but when he did, it mattered. Success means nothing, he once told me, if it makes you forget who you are. Have you ever built something out of pain and watched it become peace? We didn't chase legacy. We lived it. One screw, one circuit, one life at a time. One winter, the local paper ran a story on us. From hospital janitor to CEO Emma Carter's journey. I didn't send it to my mother. I didn't need to. Small towns talk, the story made its way around to cousins, former neighbors, even old teachers. A few days later, I got an email. Hey, long time. How have you been? No mention of Grandpa. No apology, just curiosity wrapped in fake warmth. I didn't reply, because by then I knew something they didn't. My name didn't come from them. Not anymore. It came from every night I didn't quit. Every bill I managed to pay. Every time Grandpa said, "You've got this," when I thought I didn't. He was 91 when his health started to fade again. Slower this time, gentler. He still drank his morning coffee, still wound his watch, still smiled when I walked into the room. But we both knew this time he wasn't going to recover. And suddenly, after all these years, I was the one who didn't want to let go. Have you ever felt time slipping, not in minutes, but in memories I held on tighter? Because I had already lost so much, and I wasn't ready to say goodbye. Not yet. He passed on a Tuesday morning. The sky outside our window was pale blue, quiet, gentle, like the world already knew it needed to be soft with me. I found him in his chair, the one he always called his thinking spot, a closed book on his lap, a half-finished cup of tea at his side, and that same faint smile still resting on his face. No machines, no alarms, just peace. I sat beside him, held his hand, and let the silence stretch for a while. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because I didn't want to know what life would feel like without him in it. The funeral was small, exactly how he wanted. No flowers, no speeches, just neighbors, a few early Safe Step team members, and the hospice nurse who once said, "He's the kindest patient I've ever known." I stood by the church doors thanking people, holding myself together in polite nods and soft smiles. And then I heard them. Heels on gravel, too polished, too loud for grief. I turned, and there they were, my mother, my uncle, and Brian in a black suit like he was headed to a stockholders meeting. They looked around like strangers, like tourists in someone else's loss. Have you ever seen people return? Not for love, but for what they think is left behind. And I was ready. My mother stepped forward first, arms open, smile polished like old silver. "Emma, sweetheart, you've grown into such a woman." I didn't move, didn't blink. The same voice that once said, "Let him go," was now dripping with warmth she didn't mean. She tried again. "I know things got messy back then, but we're still family." I wanted to laugh, to scream, to ask if she remembered leaving me in that hallway like I was something disposable. But I didn't. Instead, I turned toward the chapel. "He's inside. You have 5 minutes." Her smile faltered. They walked in, shuffling past the rows of people who had stayed, people who mattered. I stayed by the door, folded the donation slips for our next elder care grant, the one Grandpa and I had planned together, the one he wanted more than flowers. After the service, she came back. Tighter smile this time, sharper eyes. "So, about the estate," she said lightly. "We assume there's a will. Your grandfather wasn't careless." I looked at her expression calm. "There is," I said. Her eyes sparkled like winning was only seconds away. "We'll need to talk about how everything will be divided." I finally looked up, really looked. And I said, "He wasn't nearly as forgiving as I am. Have you ever watched someone come for love and reveal all they really wanted was control?" It was her turn to listen. The next morning, I arrived at the law office 15 minutes early. Not out of nerves, but because I'd been preparing for this moment for 7 years. Mr. Davis, Grandpa's attorney, met me with the same quiet kindness he'd shown us since the first Safe Step prototype. He'd helped us register the LLC, file our patents, even draft our first employee agreements. Now he would help close the chapter. In the conference room, the table was long, polished, and too quiet. In front of me sat two things: a sealed envelope and a small wooden box, the one Grandpa had asked me not to open until today. Minutes later, the door opened. They walked in like it was their right. My mother in sharp heels, Uncle Richard with a folder already tucked under one arm, Brian smirking like the outcome was obvious. No greetings, no condolences, just silence and assumption. Mr. Davis cleared his throat. This is the last will and testament of Henry Carter, dated and notarized on his 90th birthday. He paused, looking at me. Miss Carter, would you please open the box now? I lifted the lid with steady hands. Inside, Grandpa's pocket watch tucked beside a flash drive and a folded note. I slid the drive to Mr. Davis. The screen flickered to life. And then, his voice. If you're hearing this, I've already left this world, and if the people I think are in this room actually showed up, well, I'm not surprised. His voice was steady, clear, like he was sitting right beside us again. I, Henry Carter, leave the entirety of my estate, including Safe Step shares, real estate, personal accounts, and all intellectual property to my granddaughter, Emma Carter. Everything. The room froze. Uncle Richard's jaw twitched. Brian stopped smirking. My mother leaned forward, her voice tight. This isn't legal. He was old. She was with him every day. Who knows what she made him sign? Mr. Davis didn't flinch. He lifted a document. Mr. Carter completed a full cognitive evaluation 2 weeks before this recording. Mental clarity confirmed. No coercion. No changes were made after that date. Silence. And then from the screen, Grandpa's voice again, almost like he'd heard every word they were about to say. To anyone who claims she took from me, I say this. Emma gave me 7 more years. She gave me mornings with sunlight and tea. She gave me purpose. You gave me silence. You left me because I was inconvenient. She stayed and built something. My mother paled. Uncle Richard looked down. Brian crossed his arms. Mr. Davis closed the will with precision. There are no alternate beneficiaries, no contest clause included. Any legal challenge will void your right to inherit anything. Henry Carter's wishes are absolute. Emma Carter is the sole heir. No one spoke. Just the sound of truth, finally sealing the room. They left the room one by one, but not quietly. Not with grace. My mother spun toward me in the hallway, voice low but sharp as glass. You think this makes you better than us? Her eyes burned not with grief, but with entitlement. You manipulated an old man on his deathbed. You tricked him into signing everything over. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't flinch. I looked her in the eye and said calmly, you left him. You left both of us. And for 7 years, you never once asked if he even survived. Uncle Richard stepped forward, fists clenched. We're his children, Emma. You don't get to erase that. I turned toward him, my voice still steady. What did that title ever mean to you? A duty, a bond, or just a birthright you thought guaranteed a payday? Brian shook his head. We'll challenge the will. Go public. Tell the press you manipulated a dying man. I smiled, small and certain. Go ahead. I'll release the full video testimony, the medical reports, his journals, and every handwritten letter he left about what each of you did or didn't do when he needed you most. They fell silent. But I wasn't done. I reached into my bag and pulled out one last envelope. This, I said, handing it to my mother, wasn't for court. It was personal. Inside were 3 handwritten words. You walked away. She stared at the note. 3 words. Sharp as truth. Her hands trembled. Then slowly she crushed the paper in her fist like shame could be erased if folded small enough. But this wasn't about paper. It was about memory. And memory doesn't crumple. She didn't speak. Not a word, not a plea, just silence, the kind that comes too late. I turned to leave but stopped at the door. You lost the inheritance, I said, my voice quiet. But worse than that, you lost him. They looked at me like they didn't understand, and maybe they didn't. Not today, I continued. Not when the will was read. You lost him the day you chose convenience over love. Uncle Richard opened his mouth, but no defense came, only the weight of what couldn't be undone. I stepped into the sunlight. The wind was light, carrying the sound of traffic and new beginnings. For the first time, I didn't feel small under their gaze. I didn't feel like the forgotten one. I felt whole, not because I'd won, but because I had stayed, because I had chosen love when it was hardest, because the man they left behind had chosen me back. Have you ever walked away from someone only to realize too late they were your last chance to matter? 6 months later, the house felt quieter than ever, but not lonely. I kept his chair by the window, the one with the worn armrest and soft indent. His kettle, his pocket watch still wound at 700 a.m. each morning. A ritual, a promise. But grief wasn't the end. It was the ground I built from. I used part of the inheritance to launch something we'd only dreamed of, the Carter Foundation. Not just for Grandpa's memory, but for kids like me. And elders like him. People who had been forgotten, discarded, left behind because they weren't worth it anymore. We started small, 3 laptops, 2 folding tables, 1 borrowed room in a community center. But that first week, a teenage girl built her own fall detector just like ours. She held it up with shaking hands and shouted, "It actually works!" Something in my chest clicked. It wasn't just a memory. It was him living on through every spark, every wire, every person who finally felt seen. Have you ever watched healing happen in the hands of someone who was once overlooked? I did, every single day. And I knew then this legacy wasn't about money. It was about restoration. About choosing to rebuild the broken again and again. A year later, we opened our first real workshop. Not fancy, but filled with life. Soldering kits, printed circuit boards, coffee that tasted like burnt hope and late nights. We trained teens who had dropped out, seniors who thought they had nothing left to give, people who had been told no too many times, just like I had. One of our scholarship students, Maya, invited me to her graduation. "I never had a real family," she said, "but your foundation made me feel like I mattered." I brought her a gift. Grandpa's favorite wrench, the one that fixed more than machines. "This helped build Safe Step," I told her. And when I didn't believe in myself, he put it in my hand. Maya held it like it was gold, and maybe it was. "You do matter," I said. "Don't ever let anyone make you forget that." She cried, and for the first time so did I. Not from pain, but from knowing that what we built was bigger than us. Have you ever passed something down that carried more than weight? Something that held memory, belief, and the power to begin again. That wrench wasn't just metal, it was a name, a legacy, and now it was hers. I still live in the same house. The paint peels in places. The heater groans when it's cold, but it's home. Safe Step is bigger now. We've expanded across the state. Our team grew from 2 interns to a full staff. We have contracts, partners, and new product lines, but my life, it's still simple. No mansion, no luxury car, just morning tea, soldering smoke, and a workbench Grandpa built. Because I know what wealth really is. It's not the money in my account, it's the 7 extra years I got with him. It's the quiet conversations, the small victories, the belief he handed me piece by piece. It's the people who come through our doors carrying broken machines and broken hope and leave with both working again. Sometimes I sit by the window in his chair and hold the pocket watch. It still ticks soft and steady, just like him. Have you ever looked around and realized the life you built came from everything you were told to walk away from? That's this place, not polished, not loud, but full of purpose, because I stayed, and because he believed I could turn pain into something permanent. And now, I have. Sometimes I think about that day at the hospital, the moment they left us, the hallway smell, the silence, the way my mother's heels clicked against the tile as if she were walking away from nothing. I was just a girl with shaking hands, a nearly empty wallet, and no one backing me but an unconscious old man. But that moment changed everything. Because when they walked away, they thought they were leaving me behind. But really, they left behind the one person who would give me everything that mattered. They abandoned a dying man, and I got 7 years of life. 7 years of stories, of laughter, of hard lessons over broken toasters and midnight tea. That moment, as painful as it was a beginning. Have you ever looked back at your lowest point and realized it was the doorway to everything good? I used to think that day was the worst of my life. Now I know. It was the first brick in a foundation they never meant to leave me. They left behind ashes. I built a future, and not just for me, but for every hand that would come through my doors hoping for more, deserving of more. People often ask me if I ever wanted revenge, if I ever thought about calling them, showing them what I'd built. But I didn't. Not once. Because what I found in those 7 years wasn't bitterness, it was belonging. Belonging in late-night repairs, in shared meals made from whatever we had. Belonging in the sound of Grandpa's laugh when I burned the toast again. I didn't need to prove anything to them. I had already proved it to myself. I belonged not because of blood, but because of love, because of showing up, because of staying. And when the world said I wasn't enough, he said I was more than they'd ever see. So no, I didn't send them photos, didn't post about the awards, didn't reply to their sudden polite messages, because the victory wasn't in being seen, it was in being whole. Have you ever let go of proving them wrong and felt stronger because you didn't have to? That's the piece they'll never understand. They walked away and thought I'd vanish, but I stayed and became someone they couldn't ignore even if they tried. Every morning I still wind Grandpa's pocket watch at 7:00 a.m. It clicks softly, not just with time, but with memory. It's not just habit. It's a ritual, a reminder that love doesn't vanish, it echoes. Sometimes I hold it in my palm before work, close my eyes, feel the weight of everything we built, every late night, every fix, every no turned into maybe. It keeps perfect time just like he used to. People ask if I miss him. Of course I do, every day, in quiet ways. But grief isn't what fills the room. Purpose does. The students we train, the families we help, the stories I hear from people who once felt discarded but now feel seen. That's where he lives now. In every screw turned, every lamp rewired, every hand held steady by a safe step sensor that came from his thinking chair and my trembling hands. Have you ever lost someone and realized they never really left? He's not gone. He's just shifted into the heartbeat of this place, into the rhythm of that pocket watch, into every I didn't think I could do it, that becomes I did. And each morning when the gears click back into place, I whisper, we're still building, Grandpa, just like you taught me. The truth is, I never wanted his money. Not the estate, not the shares, not the title of CEO. What I wanted was time. And I got it. 7 unexpected years, 7 years of repairs of meals made from scraps of learning how to build more than machines, how to build a life. They thought they came back for an inheritance, but they missed what really mattered, because what Grandpa gave me was never just financial. It was quiet confidence, the kind that grows when someone believes in you even before you believe in yourself. It was the way he listened without fixing, the way he handed me tools, not answers, the way he let me fail but never let me fall alone. Have you ever realized the most valuable thing someone left you wasn't a possession, but a way of living? That's what he passed down. Not a check, not a deed, but a legacy of staying, of choosing effort over ease, loyalty over convenience, love over silence. They missed all of that. And that's why even now they don't understand what they truly lost. Because what he left behind wasn't just his. It was ours. Built with every moment we refused to walk away. They didn't come back for him. They came for what they thought he'd left. Paper, property, profit. But what they found was me. Not the girl they abandoned. Not the teenager with trembling hands. But the woman who had built something from everything they walked away from. At the law office, they wore black suits and cold smiles, spoke in soft tones like grief was a performance, like showing up late was enough to rewrite history, but grief doesn't bend like that, and neither do I. I didn't gloat, didn't argue, didn't fight for what was already mine. I just stood there calm in my knowing, because I knew the truth. Grandpa didn't choose me out of guilt. He chose me because I stayed. Because when the world went quiet, I filled the silence with care, with effort, with presence. Have you ever watched someone come back too late to matter? They thought he left behind something they could divide. But he didn't. He left a whole life and only I had lived it with him. So I let them talk, let them search for pieces they'd never understand. And when they left again, there was no pain, just peace. Because this time, I was the one who closed the door. She didn't call, didn't write, didn't knock on my door again. My mother disappeared the same way she always had, without apology, without explanation, just distance. But this time, I didn't ache for it. I didn't wait for her to change, didn't hope for softness that was never hers to give. Because I understood something now. Some people don't leave because they don't care. They leave because they can't carry anything that asks them to feel. And love, real love, asks you to feel deeply even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Have you ever stopped chasing someone and felt lighter the moment you did? That's what happened. She walked out of my life twice. Once at the hospital, once at the will. And I finally let both moments be enough, because I had already filled the space she left with purpose, with memory, with people who showed up when it counted. And I knew if Grandpa had to choose again, he still would have picked me. Not because I was better, but because I stayed. And staying, that's the part they never understood, the part that changed everything. Safe Step kept growing. What started as a single sensor became a full system. Fall alerts, medication reminders, even connection tools for lonely seniors. But to me, it was never just a company. It was Grandpa's steady hand guiding every prototype. It was the nights we stayed up redesigning parts with whatever we had. It was the belief that no one should be forgotten just because they're old, or quiet, or inconvenient. Our team grew. We hired engineers, community liaisons, people who once needed help and now led programs of their own. We built partnerships with care homes, veteran centers, and families trying to keep their loved ones safe. But behind every contract, every new feature was still one memory: Grandpa falling and trusting I'd catch him. And I did, not just that night, but every day after. Have you ever created something not to prove yourself, but to protect the part of the world you love most? Safe Step wasn't built in boardrooms. It was built in hospital corridors, in late-night whispers, in the sound of his voice saying, "You stayed." And every time someone tells me our device saved a life, I whisper back, "So did he." The more we grew, the more I realized I wasn't chasing success. I was following something quieter, something steadier, purpose. It showed up in every small thank you from a caregiver who finally slept through the night, in every senior who smiled because someone remembered they existed, and in every team meeting there was always an empty chair. His chair, no one touched it, no one had to, because we all knew he was still there in the rhythm of the work and the why behind every line of code. People asked if I ever got tired, if running a growing company alone felt too heavy. But I never felt alone, not really, because I'd learned that grief and gratitude can live in the same breath, that healing doesn't erase pain, it just builds something bigger around it. Have you ever reached a place where you stop needing applause because peace claps quietly and only you can hear it? That's where I was. Not finished, but steady, not healed completely, but whole enough to keep going, because the real success wasn't in what we sold, but in what we kept: dignity, memory, and the sound of love that never had to raise its voice to be heard. Years passed without a word, until one afternoon an envelope arrived at our office, no return address. Inside, a folded letter and a photo of Grandpa holding a baby me, smiling the way only he could. The letter was from Brian. He wrote about regret, about watching his own daughter grow up and wondering what kind of family legacy he was handing her. He asked to meet, said he didn't want money, just a conversation. I didn't answer right away, Because I knew regret isn't always the same as change, and absence doesn't earn access. But I also knew something else. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It just means choosing peace over poison. Have you ever held someone's apology and wondered if it came too late? I thought about what Grandpa would have said. Maybe something like, you don't have to open the door, but you don't have to carry the weight either. So I let it go, not to let them back in, but to set myself free. And that freedom, it felt like air. I didn't meet with Brian, but I sent a short reply. Thank you for writing. I hope you become the father your daughter can count on. That was all. No signature, no invitation, just a line to close the circle. Because by then, I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't waiting for them to understand. I had already lived the story, and I knew its truth. They left when love was inconvenient. I stayed when it cost everything, and staying, that was the real inheritance. Not the money, not the patents, not the title, but the strength to hold someone's hand when no one else would. The strength to sign a form you're too young to understand, to work 2 jobs and still whisper stories into a hospital room. Have you ever made a choice so hard and then realized it became the foundation of your entire life? That's what staying did. It didn't make me a hero, it just made me true. To him, to myself, to everything I wanted the world to be. And if I had to go back to that hallway, that hospital, that moment, I'd stay all over again. No hesitation, no regret. Segment 33. When legacy becomes action, 245 words years into running. Safe step, I realized it wasn't enough. Not just sensors, not just safety. What about the kids? Like, I had been too broke to apply for college, too alone to ask for help. So we expanded. The Carter Foundation launched new branches, free workshops, tech scholarships, support groups for teens caring for aging relatives. We even created a mobile repair unit run by volunteers that visited seniors in rural areas to fix what they thought was beyond saving. Every time I walked into those rooms, I saw him. Not literally, but in the way they smiled when someone cared, in the way their hands shook until they held a tool with confidence. I didn't do it for applause. I did it because I knew what it felt like to be invisible and what it meant when someone finally saw you. Have you ever turned your own healing into a map for someone else? That's what the foundation became. Not charity, but a mirror saying you matter, even if the world told you otherwise. At a school event, a teen named Jasmine came up to me. She wore paint-streaked jeans and held a hand-built fall sensor made from scrap parts. It's not perfect, she said, placing it on the table. But it works. I tested it on my grandpa. I picked it up. Wires, tape, hope, and heart. Then she added, my guidance counselor told me I'd never make it in tech. But you built this place, so I thought maybe I could too. I handed her back the device and smiled. You already did. She blinked, then smiled wider than she had all day. Have you ever seen someone believe in themselves because you believed first? That's why we don't build walls here. We build doors. For every girl who thought she wasn't smart enough. For every elder who thought no one would come. For every version of me still sitting in a hospital hallway, afraid but not alone. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you pass forward. And Jasmine. She walked out of that workshop a little taller, a little braver, and I knew we were just getting started. As the years passed, our mission deepened. More students, more seniors, more stories stitched together by care. But even as the work expanded, there was still one voice I listened for most, his. Grandpa's watch still ticked, but the echo of his presence was fading into memory. Until one night, while cleaning my old workshop drawer, I found it. A letter, tucked behind a faded schematic, folded 3 times. His handwriting on the front, read this when you're ready. I opened it slowly. Inside, just 1 page. Emma, you didn't just stay for me, you stayed for who you were meant to become. If you're reading this, you already know you never needed my name to build your own. I sat there for a long time. No tears, just stillness. The kind that holds both ache and awe. Have you ever received a message from someone long gone and felt them sit beside you again? That letter wasn't goodbye. It was a hand on my shoulder. A final blueprint. The last lesson, keep going, and I did. People often ask me what changed it all. Was it the invention, the company, the inheritance? No. It was the moment I stayed. When I was 17, broke, terrified, and everyone else walked away. That moment rewrote everything. I didn't know how to care for a dying man, didn't know how to file hospital paperwork, didn't know how to fix broken machines or a broken legacy. But I stayed. And slowly, step by step, I became someone else. Not overnight, not without failure, but with heart and grit and one quiet choice at a time. I became Emma Carter, not the janitor's granddaughter, not the family's disappointment, but the girl who stayed and became the woman who built. Have you ever looked back and realized the moment you feared most was actually the one that saved you? That's what staying did. It didn't just give Grandpa more years. It gave me a future. And every day since I've tried to honor that moment, because sometimes you don't need to run toward greatness. You just need to stand still when no one else will. I kept that letter in my nightstand, not for comfort, but for grounding, because every time a challenge came, every moment I doubted myself, I'd unfold those words again. You never needed my name to build your own. And somehow it steadied me, reminded me where I came from, and why I kept building. The team at SafeStep called me CEO. Newspapers wrote stories, but I never forgot that I started with a mop, a soldering iron, and a heart that refused to quit. Grandpa taught me more than how to fix a broken circuit. He taught me patience, taught me how to listen, how to show up, how to forgive even when no one asks for it. And he taught me this: when something matters, you stay. Have you ever realized that the best lessons weren't the ones spoken out loud, but the ones lived beside you? His presence lingers in everything I do. In the way I run meeting, in how I greet each student, and how I pause before making a decision just to hear the quiet like he used to. I may have lost him, but I never lost what he gave me. If I could go back to that cold hospital hallway, 17 years old, scared and small, I wouldn't change a thing. Not the fear, not the sacrifice, not the years of silence from my family. Because every step forward was born from that one decision. To stay. To sit beside a man everyone else left behind. They thought I was wasting my life. They said I was throwing away my future, but what they didn't know was that I was building one with meaning, one with memory, one that started not with money or permission, but with love. And isn't that what a future should be, built on care, on grit, on showing up again and again, even when no one's watching? Have you ever made a choice so quiet, so personal that the world didn't notice, but it became the moment that made you? That was mine. They walked away. I stayed. And from that small, defiant act of love, everything bloomed. A company, a foundation, a legacy, and a life I wouldn't trade for anything. Because I didn't just stay for him, I stayed for me. The Carter Foundation is now more than I ever imagined. We've trained hundreds, funded inventions, created safe spaces for those left behind. But the mission was never just tech. It was trust. In every hand we steady, every idea we nurture, every person who walks through our doors carrying doubt and leaves with dignity. And still each morning I wind Grandpa's pocket watch. Its steady tick reminds me where this all began. Not in a boardroom, not in a lab, but in a quiet hospital room with a girl who stayed and a man who believed in her. Have you ever looked at your life and seen the fingerprints of someone who's been gone for years but still guides you every day? I see his everywhere. In the way I teach, in the way I listen, in the way I love what others overlook, and I know without doubt he'd be proud. Tonight I'll wind the pocket watch again, then set it gently on the windowsill right where he used to sit and think. The house is quiet, the lights are low, but the work continues, the mission grows. Because what he gave me was never meant to stop with me. One day I'll pass the watch on, not because it's valuable, but because it carries everything that matters. And when I do, I'll say the same words he once said to me: you stayed, you built, and now it's yours. Have you ever been trusted with something so sacred it feels like holding memory in your hands? That's what legacy is. Not wealth, not recognition, but love. Passed carefully, quietly to someone ready to carry it. So if you're still listening, still wondering if your small, quiet choices matter, they do. Because staying loving, building, that's how the world changes, one soul at a time, one wrench, one word, one watch still ticking, and one person who dares to stay. If this story stayed with you, even just for a moment, I'd love to hear what part touched your heart. Leave a comment below, share your own stay story. And if you'd like more stories like this, real quiet, powerful, hit subscribe, because sometimes all it takes to change a life is the choice to stay.